And we are learning more about the investigation into the death of Gene Hackman and his wife and their dog. New Mexico officials revealing both of these the couple both died of natural causes, but these deaths were 1 week apart.
The three children of Gene Hackman finally break their silence after years of keeping quiet about the woman who was with their father in his last moments. Strange last words, long-lost memories, and an unspoken tale. Why haven't they spoken out at any point? In reality, what transpired? What we thought we knew about Gene Hackman's life will be completely altered when we learn the truth about this enigmatic woman. Members of the Hackman family will shock the public with their revelations. Gene Hackman's children, Chapter 1, The Hidden Foundations, step into the light. Gene Hackman was a legendary actor who played several memorable parts in classic Hollywood films. Classics like The Royal Tenenbaums, Unforgiven, and The French Connection are just a few of the many works from his lengthy career that left an indelible impression. Hackman kept his personal life under wraps, though, behind the glitter of the stage. He made it a point to shield his loved ones from the prying eyes of the press. Nevertheless, with the demise of Hackman and his wife Betsy Arakawa, his children Christopher, Elizabeth, and Leslie became the first to publicly discuss the immense grief they were experiencing. In addition to showing their parents how much they appreciated it, they wanted to honor the memory of those who had been there for them and keep it alive via this performance. The youngest of Gene Hackman's daughters, Leslie Ann Hackman, was born in 1966. Leslie avoided the limelight and lived a low-key existence, in contrast to her famously famous father. However, hiding in the shadows was not an option this time. It was impossible to look into Leslie's eyes in Los Angeles and not sense both power and suffering. While speaking to the media about her parents, she was unable to conceal her grief. "We should hold off until the cops provide us with further information. We weren't anticipating the need to inspect the entire house. This means we're rather busy. We will definitely visit New Mexico." Part of coming to terms with the facts was making this statement, which was more than simply a proclamation. That her parents had departed was the reality. One of life's greatest tragedies is seeing a home that was once filled with cherished memories of one's parents crumble into oblivion. Gene Hackman's second daughter, Elizabeth, was born in 1962. She also opted for a quiet existence away from the spotlight as the years went by. But she could not be quiet now, in this critical moment. Elizabeth released a heartfelt joint statement with Leslie and her niece Annie. "We are sad to inform you that our father, Gene Hackman, and his wife, Betsy, have passed away. To us, he was always just Dad and Grandpa, even though he was beloved and respected by millions of people throughout the globe for his exceptional acting career. We are deeply grieved by this death and will miss him terribly." To his kids, Gene Hackman was just Dad, regardless of his fame in Hollywood. That Gene Hackman was a devoted family man in addition to a cinematic great was something they hoped the public would always remember. A doting dad who gave his life to safeguarding his loved ones. As the firstborn son of Gene Hackman and Faye Maltese, Christopher Hackman came into this world in 1960. Unlike his father, Christopher went in a totally different direction. Nor in the spotlight, nor in the box office. He preferred to keep a low profile and avoid public appearances. However, Christopher's bond with his father remained strong even if he seldom appeared in public. In an interview from 1984, Gene said, "I thank God we can do that since they still embrace today." Although they may not often exhibit it in public, this comment may have revealed something about the strong relationship between the two of them. The Hackman family wasted no time in releasing a formal statement following the deaths of Gene and Betsy. This served as a memorial and an outlet for their grief at the loss. Despite his legendary status in Hollywood, the statement stressed that Hackman was first and foremost a doting grandpa and father to his family. This proved once again that Hackman was always a calm, simple, and kind man to those closest to him, even if the outside world saw him as a legendary actor. Betsy Arakawa may not have been a household name in Hollywood, but she was Gene Hackman's rock. Betsy, a gifted classical pianist, was Hackman's companion for more than 30 years, during which time he retired from acting to enjoy retirement. Included in Leslie's sharing was a mention of her stepmother. "I attribute his good health to his marriage to Betsy, and they had a beautiful life together. She worried constantly about his health and took excellent care of him. Thus, I owe her a great debt of gratitude, and her death has left me deeply heartbroken." Betsy Hackman was more than simply Gene Hackman's wife, she was also his rock in his twilight years. The Hackman family will always hold Betsy and Gene in their hearts, even though they are no longer physically present. Betsy Arakawa and Gene Hackman's untimely deaths devastated their loved ones and admirers. Their children's genuine sharing, however, shows that their heritage continues. The Hackman family will undoubtedly carry on the legacy of Gene Hackman and the principles he left behind, even if the loss is still very much felt, via their love and togetherness. Reflecting on the bond between Gene and Betsy, Chapter 2, Echoes of a Harmonious Union. The films that cemented Gene Hackman's place in cinematic history are frequently the ones that come to mind when people talk about him. Other Gene, a husband, a lover, and a man who discovered solace in the love of Betsy Arakawa, existed outside of the spotlight. While at the height of his fame in the late 1980s, Gene Hackman met Betsy Arakawa. Classical pianist Betsy, who was 30 years Gene's junior, was of Hawaiian ancestry. It appeared as though the age, background, and life experiences gap between them was insurmountable. Contrary to popular belief, their differences actually strengthened their closeness. Before meeting Betsy, Gene had been married for 30 years to Faye Maltese. They had lived together for a long time. It seems like Gene had lost interest in love when his first marriage failed. Betsy, on the other hand, was like a breath of fresh air. She brought him kindness, patience, and warmth, all of which he had no idea he still needed. Their marriage was perfect, as Gene's daughter Leslie Hackman said once. In my father's last years, Betsy was there for him every step of the way, providing loving care and making him laugh. For that, I am eternally thankful. Life with Betsy was a vibrant contrast to his first marriage, during which Gene was engrossed in his business and frequently traveled for work. After becoming legally married in 1991, Gene started to take it easy so he could devote more time to his family. His retirement was announced in 2004. Quitting the entertainment industry to be with his wife, whom he loves. In addition to being Gene's wife, Betsy was also his companion. Not everyone could relate to him the way she did. They were together for over 30 years, and she became his rock in times of spiritual difficulty. During his twilight years, when Gene was no longer a famous actor but only a senior citizen relishing in his golden years, Betsy was the one who provided constant care for him. Leslie brought up Betsy's commitment at one point. Actually maintained my dad's health. She worried constantly about his health and took excellent care of him. For a long period, despite his advanced years, Gene Hackman remained mentally sharp and physically healthy because of such care. After Betsy died away, Gene Hackman's life took a dramatic turn. His longtime companion, who had been there for him through the highs and lows of fame, was no longer by his side. Nobody could ever fill the hole she left behind. Those close to Gene remarked that he grew quieter once Betsy was gone, even if he did not often appear in the media. A lot more subdued than before, the actor had lost his charisma on film. In an undisclosed chat, Gene's second daughter Elizabeth said, "My father has always been a steadfast man, but after Betsy left, I knew he had changed. He didn't get weaker, he just lost a significant piece of his life." Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa's love story endured even though they were no longer physically present. Their love was quiet and unassuming, yet profound enough to be treasured by those in their midst. Despite the absence of lyrical language, the love was conveyed via each tender gesture. In addition to being Gene Hackman's wife, Betsy had become an integral part of his life as a friend and companion throughout his latter years. Their loved ones would carry the memory of their happy marriage with them always, even if they were no longer physically there. The Sanctuary in Ruins, Chapter 3. Discord within families due to revealed tragedies. As soon as Betsy Arakawa's death was announced, the mansion, which had been Gene Hackman's tranquil retreat, appeared deserted, nonetheless. There was no change. Everything from the pictures of them to the books that Gene would read again and again to the piano that Betsy would play in the afternoons. However, an unsettling stillness engulfed the entire scene. It was unexpected that the Hackman family would have to go through the anguish of loss again so quickly. Not everyone knew what killed Betsy Arakawa right away. Even though her family merely said she had died of natural causes, many were startled to hear the details. Hantavirus pulmonary syndrome is an extremely rare and deadly disease. It was Betsy's cause of death. Rat droppings are the primary vector for the transmission of the hantavirus, a virus that causes acute respiratory distress syndrome. Damage to the lungs becomes worse as the disease advances, and eventually, the patient will have abrupt respiratory failure. Worst of all, it tends to advance very quickly. Occasionally within a few days after the initial signs appear. It was unfathomable that Betsy could succumb to such an uncommon illness. She had never been sick before, and in the weeks leading up to her sickness, she was perfectly healthy and bursting with vitality. The sickness was sudden and catastrophic, like a hurricane. The lady who had been Gene Hackman's rock for so long disappeared very immediately. Gene Hackman was physically present when Betsy died, but he was oblivious to his surroundings. Cardiovascular illness and the deterioration of Alzheimer's were major challenges for Gene in his latter years. As time went on, his recollections got fragmented and hazy, with faces he knew turning into strangers and conversations becoming unfocused and unclear. Gene's offspring assumed he was probably too disoriented to know that Betsy had abandoned him for good. Typical of many who experienced the death of a spouse, he acted strangely in the days after his wife passed away. Neither did he bring up Betsy again, nor did he inquire about her. At other times, Gene would sit for hours at a time staring out the window, perhaps searching for something he couldn't put his finger on. The most heartbreaking part, according to Leslie Hackman's heartfelt confession, was not that her father lost his beloved, but rather that he likely was oblivious to the fact that he had done so. He behaved calmly. Skipped asking. As if some fragment of his memory had slipped away with her, he only sat there silently. The worst part, though, was far from over. Gene Hackman likewise breathed his last breath not long after Betsy did. Recent worsening of his heart ailment, along with advancing age and Alzheimer's, has hastened his health decline. Hollywood and admirers everywhere were shocked to hear of Gene Hackman's death. The death of this cinematic icon was tragic, but for his loved ones it was also the death of a father, grandpa, and spouse. "My father has also passed away, and we were still grieving over Betsy's death," Elizabeth Hackman said through her tears. Imagine a nightmare from which there is no escape, an agony from which there is no relief. Away from the hustle and bustle of Hollywood, Gene and Betsy had created a tranquil existence for themselves for a long time. Living a simple life together, they choose to savor the little things. Now that they were both gone, Gene's children were left with a profound sense of emptiness. When Christopher Hackman, Elizabeth, and Leslie Hackman's father and stepmother passed away in quick succession, it created an incredible hole in their lives. They had to deal with the reality of going on without the people who had been the bedrock of their family, in addition to the loss of two of their most cherished loved ones. "We always assumed there was plenty of time," the eldest son, Christopher Hackman, said in an interview. "With them, we hoped to make even more cherished memories. But then it was all over in an instant. Because of time constraints, we were unable to fully prepare or express ourselves." What Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa left behind endured in the hearts of their fans, family, and friends long after they passed away. Their love, the times they spent together, and the decades they spent side by side proved to be a love that would last forever, a tie that not even death could sever. The Hackmans are still adjusting to life without Gene and Betsy as of today. However, they are aware that, in some unseen place, and Betsy are continuing their eternal union. Section 4. The Keepers of the Past. Validating the lasting impact of Gene Hackman. Gene Hackman was not an ostentatious person during his life. He was the actor who could always be relied on to let his performances do the talking. But even when he stepped away from the spotlight, his legacy continued to motivate viewers. Growing up in the shadow of their talented and modest father, his children knew that this legacy would live on. "Our father always taught us that humility and patience are at the heart of excellence," as Christopher Hackman, the eldest son, put it. "We know his accomplishments are worthy of recognition, even if he was never one to revel in himself." Because of this, Gene's 3 children were hell-bent on carrying on his work. It was their hope that Gene Hackman would be remembered as more than just another name on the Oscar winners' roster in the years to come. It was important to them that people would remember the man, his tale, and the principles he upheld. Gene Hackman's children intended to do this by planning a number of tribute events in his honor. An early concept was to host an exhibition titled Hackman, A Legacy in Motion, whereby admirers of his work may view rare behind-the-scenes images and artifacts from his films. Despite Dad's reluctance to accept praise, Leslie Hackman, the youngest daughter, said that her father would have been thrilled to hear tributes to his films from fans. He has long held the view that moviegoers, and not performers, are the true creators of cinema. That is why they chose to invite not just Hackman's collaborators but also his devoted followers who had been with him for years. They were eager to hear from fans who had experienced the joy, sadness, and profound emotions evoked by Gene Hackman's cinematic characters. In addition, Hackman's offspring intended to compile a documentary film and interview series in which directors and actors who had collaborated with him could reflect on his impact. We asked Clint Eastwood, Dustin Hoffman, and even the younger performers who looked up to Hackman to share their most cherished recollections of him. Nonetheless, Gene Hackman left behind an enduring legacy that need to be preserved, including his work but also his personality. Behind the intense stare in The French Connection or the thoughtful expression in Unforgiven was a father with very rigid but loving values, although few people understood this. Despite his stern nature, second daughter Elizabeth Hackman said that her father made it clear that he loved his children at all times. His storytelling skills allowed him to impart wisdom via tales he had lived, both from his time in Hollywood and the roles he had portrayed. Each film in which their father was involved was more than simply an artistic creation, it was an integral element of the Hackman family's identity. In The French Connection, Gene Hackman taught his kids about justice and responsibility while playing the role of a gruff cop. He also demonstrated how unchecked power can corrupt individuals when he became Superman's enemy. His 3 children carried such teachings with them into adulthood. Now that Hackman had passed away, it was up to them to carry on the tradition of sharing those tales. Gene Hackman's impact on Hollywood was enormous, even after he retired from acting. A number of young actors have cited Hackman as an influential figure in their careers, including Christian Bale, Leonardo DiCaprio, and Jake Gyllenhaal. This is why his kids were thinking of starting a foundation to help budding actors attend college. According to Christopher, his father instilled in him the value of perseverance and commitment. His journey to Hollywood was far from smooth, and he would have cherished the opportunity to mentor aspiring performers who are passionate about their craft and willing to put in the work. To assist the future generation learn from the people who came before them, the scholarship fund would do more than just give money, it would also put them in touch with industry veterans. Keeping the family's relationship with fans alive was the primary goal of Hackman's 3 children. Their father was an integral part of the Hackman family and the film industry, in their eyes. They carried on their father's work by relaying Gene Hackman's tales, planning memorial events, and making sure his name would be remembered for years to come. He may not be physically there anymore, but his teachings, voice, and legacy will endure, Elizabeth remarked with a grin that betrayed her nostalgia. We assure you of it. The promise was made by the offspring of Gene Hackman, who bore not just his name but also the responsibility of carrying on his legacy. Uncovering the hidden scars, handling grief and public criticism in Chapter 5. There was a tense stillness in the Hackman household these days, as all eyes were on them from the media and the public. The Hackman family's whereabouts, activities, and, most crucially, reaction to reality remained a mystery to everyone. Nevertheless, the media continued to run with tales, speculations, and headlines about it. The public's interest intensified day by day, but the Hackman family remained completely silent. The media, however, were emboldened by that quiet. There has never been peace in Hollywood, particularly for legendary actors like Gene Hackman. Nobody knew it better than his family. They had to cope with dramatic headlines and constant calls from the press from the moment the news broke, as well as made-up tales relayed by unnamed sources. The unsubstantiated rumor spread by a tabloid magazine said that the Hackman family was at odds over the funeral's logistics, unable to settle on a public or private memorial service to pay tribute to their father. After reading this, Elizabeth Hackman, who had always shied away from the limelight, became enraged. She elaborated by saying that the writers treat us like family even though they have no idea who we are. Beside a trusted companion. Despite her familiarity with the entertainment industry from her years of working in television, Elizabeth's sister Leslie was equally sick of the public eye. She said that it's weird that even suffering becomes a topic of conversation. Christopher, the eldest son, meantime, decided to keep quiet and shield his family from gossip. Public opinion was always weighing on them, though, and no one could dispute it. Many loyal followers still wanted to send their sympathies to the Hackman family, despite all the claims. Thousands of messages paid respect to Gene Hackman on social media. His uplifting interviews, vintage footage, and classic cinema moments went viral. As one admirer put it, Gene Hackman was a multi-talented artist. He brought joy to our lives as a storyteller and a legend. While we share their grief, we also rejoice in his lasting impact. Another inquiry was made alongside the tributes. The Hackmans' next move is anyone's guess. Would they invite the public to a memorial service, or would they want to keep things private? Discussions continued despite the lack of formal responses. Hollywood insiders said that Dustin Hoffman, Clint Eastwood, and other former Hackman co-workers had called the family to offer their assistance in planning a memorial. However, it remained unclear if that would indeed transpire. a truth existed that was hardly grasped by those on the outside. It was a journey through loss, not only anguish. The ordeal was already challenging for individuals who had to endure it while under the scrutiny of the public. The strain was particularly hard on Christopher, who was physically robust and the rock upon which his family rested. According to a close buddy, Chris feels powerless since he is the sort of guy who always tries to control everything. Elizabeth, who preferred to keep to herself, even shied away from the press. For fear of having her prized image tarnished, she avoided reading the newspaper and avoided headlines mentioning her father. For the first time, Leslie was nervous about addressing an audience, despite her habit of sharing the principles instilled in her by her parents. According to her, "I should be strong because my dad would want us to be, yet there are moments when I wish I could run away." One thing was constant, while people's methods of dealing with it varied. Long-term concealment was not an option. The most pressing concern for the Hackmans was not what the general public anticipated. However, what are their true desires? In planning their father's memorial, they were mindful of how to make Gene Hackman proud. Nothing showy or loud, but something genuine and significant. Even if they aren't quite ready to decide, one thing was clear. They would not stand by and watch as their father's name became a fantastic tale. The family was deeply affected by Elizabeth's comment, which made them all realize that Dad had no interest in celebrity. Priorities in his life included his family and his job. Do what's best for him, not what the public wants, if we must act. Maybe that was the single most crucial aspect. The media could keep guessing. People might keep expecting. The Hackmans, nevertheless, were well aware that the road ahead belonged only to them. Not in response to external pressure, but out of deep reverence and love for their great father, they would emerge at the proper moment. Dawn in the midst of night, Chapter 6. Welcome to the land of healing and onward movement. A defeat does not spell doom. It marks yet another fork in the road, one that the Hackmans had hoped to avoid. The time has come, nevertheless, when they must press on. Day after day, the sun comes up. But its illumination fails to alleviate the gloom that resides within their souls. Those times, though, make them understand that forgetting isn't an option. They must learn to live with it if they want to go on. The Hackman family was able to recuperate in peace after months of being the center of attention. The press will no longer be contacted or their camera lights flashed anytime they made an appearance. All had reverted to its most basic forms at this point. Some examples of family time include sharing a meal, having a lengthy evening chat, or even just sitting quietly and watching each other. Elizabeth felt ready to confront reality after avoiding it by removing herself from social media and shutting off her phone. He had sent recordings to his children and grandkids, so she started reading his old letters again while listening to them. These insignificant details brought her closer to him than before, rather than making her more devastated. Who, throughout his life, had shown himself as a powerful protector of his family, was now slowly coming to terms with his own suffering. He stumbled upon a long-lost letter that Gene Hackman had composed for his children many years ago while going through his father's collection of mementos one afternoon. "One day I won't be here anymore, but that doesn't mean I'll be gone," he wrote it. "I will forever be a part of you because you will always have my tales, teachings, and love with you." Reading those phrases made Christopher understand that living does not imply forgetting the past. On the contrary, it was a means by which his father might live on in all their beloved memories, expressions, and deeds. The daughter who had always sought equilibrium, Leslie, let herself be exposed. "Do you think we will miss out on Dad's legacy if we continue to repress our feelings?" she asked Elizabeth one night. At that moment, the three siblings realized how much they relied on one another. Emotional intelligence was severely lacking in the Hackman household. Despite his wonderful parenting, Gene Hackman was never one to profess sentimental expressions of love. His unending availability to his children in times of need and the many hours they spent together discussing life's lessons were tangible manifestations of his love for them. His offspring were now picking up the habit as well. They started spending more time together, more like a family than just friends dealing with a shared tragedy. Not with remorse but with pride, they watched their dad's flicks as a family. They continued to recount the anecdotes that Gene Hackman had shared with them, and they even made light of the times when their father had been overly severe as children. Elizabeth said something that resonated with the whole family one night while they were all gathered around. "Even though Dad passed away, the family he started is still with us. It takes precedence over anything else." At that moment, it hit them. Gene Hackman had left behind more than just a cinematic history, he had also left behind a familial legacy, an unbreakable link. Preserving the ideals passed down by their father was of utmost importance to the Hackman family. However, they were eager to do more than just preserve memories. After believing his father's work belonged solely in the past, Christopher started making plans to curate an exhibition honoring Gene Hackman. He hoped that by inviting fans to this celebration, they would get a glimpse of the man behind the screen rather than merely an opportunity to pay tribute to a cinematic icon. Elizabeth chose to write a book on her father, a modest but remarkable guy in his own right, rather than from the vantage point of a Hollywood celebrity, even if she herself is not a public figure. Leslie was working with a director to create a documentary about Gene Hackman, drawing on her background in the media. She hoped that people would remember not just his amazing performances, but also the actor behind them. An individual with their own unique set of strengths, weaknesses, and indomitable spirit. They did not have the public's best interests at heart. Doing this was not an attempt to appease the press. They were acting in their father's best interest. That, above all else, was paramount. Heartbreak is never easy. Nevertheless, dawn follows twilight. It was inevitable that the Hackman family would experience periods of profound loneliness. Sometimes, they would experience heartache and longing for their father. However, they were also aware that their father would always encourage them to continue. Not by taking over his work, but by embracing it and making it their own. Gene Hackman's children are carrying on his vision for a meaningful existence. They would keep on walking regardless of the length of the night or the intensity of the agony. The Hackman family knows that no matter what, tomorrow will be a good day to live since morning will always arrive. The children of Gene Hackman finally told the story of the woman who stood by his side throughout his life, but did they share the full truth? A chilling image was painted by the recollections, the parting of lips, and the unspoken details. One thing was certain, though, Gene Hackman was never truly gone, his tale and legacy endured.